Since I can remember, I was always physically and verbally abused by my dad, but he seemed to love the rest of my siblings. He never asked them to do chores much, nor did he yell at them like he yelled at me. And he never spanked or beat them like he did me. Welcome to Human Heart Stories. My name is Julie, and today I will be telling a story called My Dad Married My Ex-Wife. Please listen with me and help like and subscribe to this channel for more stories on people's true life experiences. I am the oldest child of 5 children. I grew up in Laos in the countryside. When my dad bought new clothes or brought home snacks and candy from the big city, he would give them all or mostly to the younger children. And then he would say to me, "You are the oldest one, so you've already had a lot. Now is the younger one's turn." He might give me 1 or 2 just to say he gave me something. I was hurt and sometimes confused by how Dad treated me. Sometimes my dad would beat me so hard and my mom would only come and cry with me and give me a pat on the head. But even after Dad yelled or beat me, I would still come back into his arms seeking comfort. If I caught him in a good mood, then things were fine. But if I caught him in a bad mood, then he would push me away and tell me to get off of him. I had a sister who was only a couple years younger than me. But even so, my dad would only ask me to do all of the chores. Sometimes when my mom was home, things seemed fine at home. But the times when my mom was not home, he was always angry and yelling or hitting me. Dad liked to hunt, so there were many times when he would go out to hunt and come back with his catches of the day. He would make a delicious meal, but then he would tell me, "Just drink the soup like the elders. Save the meat for the younger ones." When I was about 12 years old and now more mature, I became more aware of the differences in how Dad treated me from the rest. I kept wondering why my dad did not love me. I am my dad's child too, so why does he not love me like the rest of my brothers and sisters? There were many times, if I did a chore not to his standards or made a mistake at something, he would beat me up so bad. I would cry for 1 or 2 hours and fall asleep crying in a corner. And my mom was aware of everything, but she never did much and never said much to my dad. The most she might say is, "You shouldn't be hitting the kids." And then that was it. My mom wasn't very vocal in their relationship. Dad had control of all their finances. My mom was like a slave to him. She did not have a voice at all. She did not dare speak up or step on my dad's boundaries. So, even if my dad was beating me up, my mom couldn't say a word. By the time I was 14, I worked hard at my chores and learned how to deal with my dad better so as to not get a scolding or a beating from him. Except there was one time. I was at that age where I wanted a bike so bad. My friends had bikes. and my dad had bought a brand new high-end bike that I wanted so bad to ride. So the times when Dad was not home, I would take out the bike and practice riding it. I was able to practice the few times Dad was gone, and then finally I learned how to ride a bike. One day, my parents were getting ready to leave the house to tend to their garden for the day. And when he was leaving, he made it clear to me that he did not allow me to touch his bike. He said he did not want me breaking his bike. But due to my strong desire that I could not control, I snuck out with the bike. I took it out on a 20-minute ride to visit my friends. By nighttime, I came back home and placed the bike back where it was. I didn't check the bike and did not know that one of the tires had a flat tire. I went inside the house and went straight to cooking dinner for the family. When my dad and mom came home, he went straight to check on his bike. He noticed that one of the tires had a flat. He was so angry, he came straight to find me, but asked all the children who had touched his bike. My siblings said that I had touched it. Dad was furious and yelled, "Do you know how expensive this bike is? You better go fix the tire right now or you will get a good beating." I rushed to go look at the bike, and sure enough, there was a flat tire. I had no knowledge of what to do with a flat tire. I was scared and frantic. I ran to an uncle's house to borrow an air pump. I tried to pump air into the tire, but it was not working. Dad came to check on me and scolded me some more. My mom even sided with my dad and yelled at me as well. She said, "Your dad clearly told you not to touch the bike. How dare you disobey him? He beats you every day, and is it not enough for you?" Dad came and grabbed the air pump out of my hand and demanded, "You better make sure to fix the tire with this or else." He waved the air pump in my face. Then before I knew it, he came down hard with the air pump and knocked me on the head with it. There was a piece of metal that surrounds the air pump. Then I felt something warm oozing down my head, and then realized my head was bleeding. I couldn't move and fell onto the ground. My mom just said, "Why did you hit him so hard?" But Dad continued yelling at me, telling me to get out of his house. My mom saw that I was badly hurt, so resorted to comforting me. She held me in her arms. My head was covered in blood. So Mom ran to go find medicine and bandages for my head. My mom was able to yell a few words back at my dad this time. But Dad continued with his cussing and foul words. "You are the worst son, stupid human being, disobeying your dad like that." I was very sad and emotionally hurt by my dad's words. I did not know why my dad hated me so much. I dealt with my injury for several days. My maternal grandma came into town for an event. She came to visit us at our house. She saw my head bandaged and asked, "What happened to your head?" I told her that Dad had beat me. She grabbed me in her arms and held me so tight. She got emotional and gently patted my head. She said, "I'm very sorry, dear." Then she added, "We are leaving home soon. Do you want to come spend a few days with us? You should come spend a few days with us." So then happily left with my grandma. When we were alone for the first time, Grandma asked me about the story behind my head. I told Grandma the whole story. In the end, it was my fault for touching Dad's bike. But Grandma said, if he loved you, he would let you touch his bike. But even so, your head injury was not necessary. Then I confessed to her, Grandma, my dad has always treated me this way. He has always scolded and beat me since I was born. I think he hates me. Then Grandma said to me, Grandson, now that you are older and wiser, I will tell you something. I did not want to tell you this, and I would not be telling you this if your father loved you. But since he does not, then I will tell you. The truth is that your father now is not your biological father. Then Grandma told me my biological father's name. I was so shocked at the news. But then now everything made sense. My life made sense. Grandma then told me that my birth father was my mom's first husband. Mom was pregnant with me when they became separated. My birth father was helping his relatives move to Thailand. This was just after the war. Mom was near her due date, so she stayed home while my father left town. At that time, there were still people escaping to Thailand. My dad did not plan to stay in Thailand, but they came to a point where it was too dangerous for my dad to come back home. Too many enemies on the road and too many deaths already. His relatives did not allow my dad to come back and made him stay in Thailand. Grandma continued, your mom soon gave birth to you. She went through hardship alone, waiting and waiting for your dad to return. And then the military moved citizens from your mom's village into another. In the new village, still no word from your dad. Your mom cried alone for over a year. No clue if he was dead or still alive. The days went by. Then, when you turned 3, your current dad now met your mother, and both got married. He adopted you as his child. I told Grandma, I wish you would have told me this a long time ago, so that I would have understood, so that even after Dad scolded or beat me up, I would have not felt so bad about it, and I wouldn't have crawled back into his arms for comfort. I cried to Grandma. So then I asked Grandma, do you know if my birth dad is still alive? She said, I don't know. I will see if anyone knows. When I returned home, I had a new attitude, new strength. I still did everything as I was told, but I made sure to stay out of my stepdad's way. I am grateful for him for raising me, but I knew to keep my distance. I thought to myself that even though he did not love me, I would still love him. I was also more mature now and knew how to stay out of trouble. When I turned 21, I found a new job. I wanted to work hard and save money. I wanted to get married and move out of my dad's house. I then went with some work buddies to go meet girls. I met a beautiful woman. We dated for several months and got married. She didn't like the town I lived in, so we moved into her parents' town. After 2 years, we had two children, a boy and a girl. At that time, she had an older sister who had married an American man and left for America. The sister called back home very often, chatting with my wife and their mother mostly. I went to work every day as my wife stayed home with the children. My mother in law came over every day while I was working. I am not sure exactly what they had so much to talk about, but not long afterwards, my wife started acting differently. She started picking fights with me and was constantly on her phone. She claimed she was talking to her sister each time. She also glammed herself up while staying home. She became distant and was no longer the same person I knew. Each time she had a phone call, she would go into another room to pick up the call. I asked her who she was talking to, and she said, "Just talking to my sister and brother in law. They miss our kids so much. If you don't believe me, then ask my sister." But something about her attitude was different. So then one time, she was cooking in the kitchen, making lunch. I was on my way to work, but I had to change the oil first. So I was outside, changing oil on my car. When I came back inside, I couldn't find her. I looked to see if she had packed me lunch for work. Then, finally, I went out to the backyard, and there she was, chatting away on her phone. I walked up slowly to her and could hear her speaking in an unusual tone of voice. Definitely not talking to her sister. When she saw me, she quickly hung up. I asked her who she was talking to, and she said her sister. I said, "Don't lie to me. I already heard you. Does your sister really have nothing better to do all day but call you?" I asked for her phone, but she refused. I tried to grab the phone, and instead she threw it on the ground. It broke into a few pieces. I was angry, but it was time for me to go to work, so I left for work. Later, when I returned home from work, my wife was nowhere to be found. So I went to my in law's house, and sure enough, she was there. My in laws looked angry at me and didn't even greet me. I said to my wife, "Let's go home." My mother in law started shouting at me, "How dare you break my daughter's phone? You accuse her of having an affair, talking on the phone to men, but have no proof." I got an earful from my mother in law and couldn't believe my wife lied and said I broke her phone. It was her who purposely threw it on the ground. My wife refused to come home with me, so I left. She didn't come home for several days, and I didn't even bother. But then I received divorce papers. I was in disbelief, but my wife was adamant about a divorce. Her mother stood by her side. So then we went through a divorce. We split up our children, and I took our son and she took our daughter. I was very disappointed and ashamed of myself to face my parents, especially my dad. I knew I wouldn't hear the end of it. I left my ex-wife's town and moved near to where my grandma was. I definitely did not want to move back home with my parents. A month later, my grandma had visitors from America. She asked them about my birth dad and then gave my information to these visitors. They said they didn't know exactly where my birth dad was, but that they were sure he was still alive. He was living in America. They took my name and phone number and went back to America. A few months later, I got a phone call from this strange number. I picked it up. It was a man's voice. He asked who I was and confirmed my name and birthday. I confirmed it for him 2 times. Then he said, "Son, I am your father." My heart almost stopped. The joy that I felt in that moment, I felt a piece of hope. Even as an adult, I felt that I needed my dad, and it was the best thing in the world to hear from my dad, to hear his voice. I said, "Is it really you?" And then I cried. I cried for a long time, and I couldn't really say anything, and he cried with me. Then I told him about my hardship, my recent divorce, my stepdad, and my mom. I could barely speak through my tears. I told him about how my stepdad treated me, but that I did not know he was my stepdad until I was older. My dad was sorry for me and expressed love and empathy. He said when my mom was pregnant with me, it was the most joyful experience for him, but that his relatives took him to Thailand and he was not able to come back for my mom, and then he lost contact. My dad soon sent me money, and I was able to build a new home for me and my son. And then shortly I met a new woman, and we got married half a year later. Another year went by, and my birth dad told me that he was coming to Laos in a month. He wanted to meet me, but also that he was planning to remarry. My dad was widowed. He had met his girlfriend online and wanted to come marry her this year. He didn't give me much details and said he would just let me know when he gets here. Then one day, my dad called me out of the blue from a strange local number. He was already in town. He said he had been here for a few days, but was still busy arranging a wedding with his new wife's family. Plus, he said he was with a few people and he didn't want to burden me with picking him up at the airport. He said, "Son, I married your new mom already. We are having a wedding reception tomorrow, and I want you to come." Dad gave me the address to meet him at his hotel, and then said, "We'll head to his new in-laws' house from there." The address was in my ex-wife's town. The thought of going back there was dreadful. I was going to ask my dad more questions, but he was in a rush and had hung up. I drove all night and took my son too. I thought to myself, well, since we are going to be in my ex-wife's town, I may as well take him to go see his mother after my dad's wedding. When I neared the hotel, I called my dad. He said he will come out to wait outside for us. When we got there, my son and I walked up to the entrance. I saw my ex-wife standing there with my dad. My heart dropped. This could not be. But before I could react any further, my son ran up to hug his mom. He hugged his mom so tight and said that he missed her. Where has she been? My ex-wife was in shock, and she tried to push my son away, but he kept holding on to her. My dad and I hugged. He looked attractive and was still young, maybe just early 40s. He introduced me to his new wife. She could barely look at me and was very embarrassed. Up at the hotel, my ex wife went into the bathroom. She did not come out for a long time. Dad asked my grandson, my dad asked my son, "Grandson, how come you are hugging your new grandma so tight? Is she someone you know well?" My son said, "Yeah, she's my mom." My dad fell silent, but then uttered, "Oh." He didn't dare ask more questions. We rode quietly to my ex in law's house. When we got there, I knew many of the faces. I was very uncomfortable, embarrassed, and wanted to hide, but everyone who knew me greeted me. Dad just watched, and I could see that he knew, but he didn't say anything. Then I started hearing the buzz around me. What is the ex husband doing here? Is he trying to ruin his ex wife's wedding? Is he that jealous? My ex mother in law, especially, was not happy. I minded my own business. I kept myself busy and did not talk to anyone, only Dad. Dad kept coming to check up on me and to chat with me, and it confused everyone. But it wasn't long before the gossip turned into shock. After the reception, Dad had initially planned to come back with me and his wife to visit me and relatives in my town. But then instead, he said he was very busy and will catch up with me at another time. A few days later, Dad came to visit me, but by himself. I was relieved he came by himself. I knew he knew the truth by now, but we ignored the topic. I thought about those times he listened to me bashing my ex wife. I am sure he remembered them too. My dad returned back home shortly. A year later, he was able to bring his wife to America. To this day, we still don't talk about it. I am thankful for my dad and grateful that both my dad and ex wife keep my son and I in their thoughts. They send us financial support on a regular basis, and it has helped me tremendously. I am still, though, in disbelief that this big world, how small this world can be, and how my dad ended up with my ex wife is just incredible. This story ends here. Thank you for listening to Human Heart Stories. And remember to please help like and subscribe to this channel for more stories on people's true life experiences.